Hey guys, Kevin here for Doctor Who, Series 9, Episode 9, Sleep No More. And I was definitely looking forward to this episode, mainly because it was a found footage episode, and that's something we haven't had at all from Doctor Who. And plus, this was also the first episode that wasn't a two-parter, and that was also very interesting, mainly because, every episode of this series has been a two-parter, and this one wasn't. And I have to say, I think that was a good idea because this was the first found footage episode, and if they were to do more than, one for a found footage episode, that's unique. Another found footage episode that's like not as unique definitely becomes very formulaic. And I have to say that this episode was good. I just didn't find it as interesting as some of the other ones. And that's not the found footage. That's not the problem. Problem with this episode is just it not, and it's also not because it was one episode. I feel like it was fine. There was one episode. Like I said, if you would have done multiple episodes, it would not have been as interesting. It was just there really wasn't anything that deep about this episode. It wasn't as, big. It didn't feel as big as some of the other episodes, but I definitely really liked it. I will say it was quite scary at times, and I think it worked well as a found footage show. It didn't feel like Doctor Who, though. I will definitely say that. The intro is not even in this episode. Like that's how deep they made this, which I really liked, I have to say. But let's just get into it. The opening of this episode, I think, was one of the best openings we've had all the whole season. I think the opening was really great here because we see this man. He's speaking into a camera, and he basically tells us that nobody should watch this. He says, "Look, don't watch this," and he explains that he's at a lab, and he's going to explain what's happening as best he can. And his name is Rausmussen on the Laverier space station. And Rasmussen's as a character that obviously was very interesting because we know that we saw it in the promo. He's this man, and basically we cut to, and that I thought was a very good opening because we don't really know what's going on, and it makes this very interesting because obviously he's telling us not to watch it. That makes me want to watch it. So we cut to a group of soldiers introducing some men named Chopra, Commander Nagata, and Deep Ando. Thing with these characters is that they just weren't that interesting. They really weren't. I didn't find that interesting. I think we've had more interesting characters on the show. These three were not one of them. They quibble about their own mission to find out what's going on. There's also a Grunt 474. They're the rescue crew, and the footage comes from their personal cameras. They came to rescue Rasmussen. Of course, we know that Rasmussen is alive, and I like that we find out what's going on here. Rasmussen warns anyone that their lives may depend on paying close attention. Now, where he said that, that is where the intro would have usually started, but instead it's just Rasmussen, who I have to say, whoever played him did a really good job narrating this episode, definitely. He was actually one of the more compelling things about this episode was Rasmussen's narration. Um, the rescue team moves through empty quarters. Rasmussen says there was no crew left, but there were strangers. And you definitely got the found footage feel of this episode. And of course, those strangers are Clara and the Doctor, who I thought were good in this episode, just not as interesting as they've been. I thought they were still pretty good, though. I liked how we started off with them arguing. That was my other thing this episode. It really wasn't fun. I didn't find this episode fun. I found it dark. I found it scary, but I didn't really find it fun. And next week's episode definitely looks like a lot more fun. The Doctor flashes his psychic paper. They believe he is a stress assessor, and they explain that the station went silent 24 hours ago, and they've come to find out why. So Nagata puts them under her command, and the Doctor examines the ship, believes it's been dead for a long while. He doesn't know why, but 474 says there are eyes in the sky. He tries to pet Chopra. When Chopra swats his hand away, 474 responds as if it's a physical threat, choking Chopper out. The Doctor explains it's the 38th century, and 474 is a vat grown. So obviously they're back in the future now. And Clone Grunt Soldier, they hear noise in the corridor. A creature comes at them. They find a room and try to close the door, but the creature gets an arm, and eventually the creature dissipates in granules. And like I said, the creature in this episode I thought was actually pretty creepy. Not yet though. This was creepy, but it didn't get too creepy. But there was like no background music this entire episode, so that also worked very well. Deep Ando was stuck out in the corridor. Nagata tries to contact him, but with no success. The Doctor examines the granulus, and Clara finds pods that Chopper calls Morpheus. Morpheus is our big monster of the week in this episode, which I thought Morpheus was actually, like I said, pretty threatening. One of them opens and Clara winds up inside, and after a moment it opens back up. 470 says the last Morpheus pod is not empty, and they find Rausmussen inside. So a Morpheus hologram explains that they live in a time of prosperity, but they always need sleep, and the Morpheus containment unit concentrates this sleep experience into a 5-minute process that provides the chemical benefits of sleep so that you can continue working. And everyone on Triton is using it. They debate the morality of Morpheus. They don't really know if what Morpheus is saying is good or if it's true, but the Doctor says in creating its Rausmussen has also created a monster. So we realize that Rausmussen is the one that created Morpheus, and That was very interesting. So the doctor says that now this is where things get interesting. The monster is made of sleep dust, the mucus that builds up in your eyes. That's what the doctor thinks this monster is made up of. He says the crew has already been digested. Rasmussen only survived because he hid, and Deep Ando tries to enter a room, but the computer demands he do the Sawn. Now the Sawn is Mr. Sandman, and every time the creature Morpheus attacks, Mr. Sandman plays. That was creepy. All of those scenes with Mr. Sandman playing actually very creepy because we don't know what's going on. We don't know why this is happening. And the way the doctor was able to come to that conclusion, I thought was very cool the way that they did that. And that stuff, that was creepy. And that really kept me into this episode. I will say, though, it wasn't the most compelling episode, definitely. You can just tell from this, it wasn't as compelling. Apparently, the computer was reprogrammed by the crew after a Christmas party. He has to sing Mr. Sandman, the Morpheus song. The creature nearly reaches him before the door finally opens. I mean, I thought the creature was going to kill him, but it nearly reaches him. So Rasmussen said that Deep Ando was the first to die, and again, I like the way that Rasmussen was kind of just carrying through this whole thing. So the gravity shields begin to fail, and my only thing with Rasmussen being the main character of this episode is that the Doctor and Clara very much felt like supporting characters. Like, they didn't feel like they really belonged in this episode. They didn't really do... They did stuff in this episode, but it just felt more like this was more of Rasmussen's episode, which wasn't bad. It's just we're probably never going to see him again. Really, I don't think we're going to. So Doctor tries to fix the problem. The monsters find them struggling. The Doctor fixes the shield, and they run into the gallery cold storage. 474 and Chopper are trapped outside. 474 and Chopper are in the halls. They're trying to find Deep Ando, but Chopper decides to head for the rescue boat. And if the rest aren't back soon, he'll assume that they're dead and blown to the station. So the doctor hacks into their helmet cameras and tries to figure out what they're missing about the creatures. Nagata points out that they don't have helmet cameras, even though they're still seeing footage. The doctor decides to let the Sandman enter, and Chopra and 474 are stuck in the hall because of the damage. They're surrounded by Sandmen, and 474 says he can save them and knocks Chopra out. The doctor figures out the creatures he cannot see, and so he lets them into this cold storage. So he, Nagata, and Clara sneak out and lock the Sandman in. Chopper wakes up to 474 dying, but they're on the other side of the wreckage. 474 sends Chopper off while he fights the Sandmen, and the doctor shows footage and asks what's wrong with it, what's missing. The problem is that there are no cameras. So how and why does this footage exist, obviously? Because, there aren't cameras anywhere. We realize that this footage is being recorded using the Sandman, but by who and why? And he says the Morpheus process. He points out that there's nothing from Chopra's point of view because he refuses to use Morpheus, and the doctor realized that the gravity shield didn't fail, it was powered down. He realized that something was being kept alive. So Chopper continues, makes his way through the station. He enters a room, screams the door closed behind him. The doctor and company goes back to the rescue ship, finds Rausmussen there. Rausmussen said the Sandman can't be fought. They made him see that humans are simply their food, but that's the way it is. And he agreed to help them if they spared him. He's got a container with patient zero, a man who hasn't slept in 5 years, and Nagata pulls a gun, and Rausmussen opens the container, letting patient zero out, and the doctor distracts patient zero, and Clara and Nagata run out. Nagata shoots Rausmussen. The doctor says things aren't making sense. It's like things are just being done just for effect, and it didn't seem like there's something weird going on. He doesn't know what it is, and he knows that there's something going on with this. So basically, Nagata shoots Rausmussen. They try to make it to the TARDIS, but they're surrounded by Sandmen. The Doctor self-destructs the gravity shields. They escape into the TARDIS, and that's basically where this ends. I mean, it really wasn't that thrilling. I mean, it was thrilling, but it felt like, this was one episode, so they really couldn't do much. But then the ending of this episode was very interesting. Rasmussen is on screen again. He says the message isn't an alibi, it's his plan. The message contains the Morpheus signal, and Rasmussen is revealed as a Sandman, and that's basically how this episode ends. I know that was a very short review, but I didn't really have too much to say about this episode. I thought this was a good episode. I thought it worked well for what it did. But like I said, I just didn't find it all that interesting. I think it could have been a lot more interesting. And it's not that I didn't want to be, it's not that I don't think this episode shouldn't have been found footage. I think this episode worked well as found footage, and I think that reveal of Rasmussen was good. I just felt like it was very one note. Like, there really wasn't anything that deep in this episode. I wanted more of a deeper episode than I did, I guess. I mean, we just had some great episodes with some really great stuff, like that great speech with the doctor last week. We didn't really get that in this episode. I thought the acting was fine here, but I just really wasn't as into it as I wanted to be, which is why I really don't have much to say about this episode. I will say this, though. Next week's episode looks like a ton of fun. I can't wait for the return of Riggsy, and also Ashiter is back next week, which I'm looking forward to as well. But like I said, the scene with the Sandmen was actually quite creepy. Are we going to see Rasmussen again? I'm not really sure. I mean, the Doctor and Clara, luckily they did escape, but I just found this episode not that interesting. I think it could have been a bit more interesting than it was. Um, And my biggest thing, I also felt like this episode should have been a Halloween episode. I felt like the Zygon invasion should have aired after Sleep No More, and it should have aired when the Zygon invasion aired, because this was actually quite a creepy episode. I will say that. The idea of the Sandman is cool. I just didn't really feel like they really got into it that much in this episode. Like the idea of the Sandman, things like that. It wasn't as interesting as it could have been. I don't know what you guys saw this episode. Like I said, my least favorite episode of the season by far. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for Ash vs. Evil Dead, and then we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.